Thank you so much for picking this session out of all other ones. And this is the room the furthest away, so you took the hike up the stairs, you found the room, so well done. Or maybe you just looked for the room the furthest away, I don't know. Today I'm going to be talking about how to successfully build a data platform. But first, briefly, the why. So imagine your organization has decided to take the next step in becoming data-driven. Everyone wants to be data-driven. And you're the new data hire, and you're in the middle of your onboarding, and you decide to test the waters a little bit, so you ask the following question. Who are our 3 biggest customers? You ask one of the POs. The product owner answers, well, looking at our product usage, so looking at our user tracking tools, we can see that the following 3 customers, their users, they're interacting the most with our product. Hence, these are the 3 biggest customers. Okay. You chat with somebody from customer success, and they say, looking in HubSpot, our CRM tool, we can see that the following 3 companies, they have the biggest headcount, biggest turnover, they're enterprise. They must be the biggest customers, but I don't know how much they're paying us. Oh, okay. Then you chat with the finance team, and they say, looking at the payments that we get in, we can see that the following 3 customers have the highest ARR, annual recurring revenue. So you get very different answers depending on who you ask, and the answers are based on different systems, on different data sources. There's clearly no common definition of what a customer is, nor what biggest means. So this is clearly problematic. And this is why you've been hired. Nice, you're going to solve this. We need a data platform to end the issue of siloed data and competing truths. With the data platform, we can achieve this beautiful scenario of one source of truth. I'm not going to talk anymore about why the data platform is a solution for this. However, this is something that I am very passionate about. So if you want to talk more about the why, please grab a hold of me. Because today we're going to talk about the how and how to succeed. And what is a data platform? Let's just put the foundation there. So there is no global definition of what a data platform is, but this is my very basic definition right now. A data platform is a place where you can ingest data from one place and put it someplace else. It contains a mindfully modeled one source of truth data storage, and it enables the finding and accessing data to use it for your use cases, to answer your questions, as well as extending the data already there for new use cases and new questions. And I would argue that a data platform is usually a lot more complex than this. I mean, you have things like access control, machine learning workloads. I didn't say AI, I said machine learning workloads, playgrounds, analytic notebooks kind of environments, visualizations. But let's keep it simple here, and hopefully it will kind of work with your definition of what data platform is. Does somebody strongly disagree? Please raise your hand. Okay. Are you just saying that to be kind? We'll see. Okay, so today I'm going to be talking about these 4, what I would say, common pitfalls when working with the data platform as well as implementing a data platform. And I'm going to provide kind of solutions for avoiding these pitfalls. So that's kind of the agenda for this session. So picking the wrong use cases for your data platform, having a messy data model, having expensive data vendor tools, as well as your maybe newly built data platform just simply not being used. That would suck. Now, who am I? Hello, my name is Hugo Hjertén. Sorry for not mentioning that initially. I'm from Gothenburg. I live in Malmö with my wife and my 1-year-old daughter, and I'm actually on parental leave now. And then you're wondering, who's taking care of the child? Aren't you? Where is she? I don't know. No, it's my dad has been so kind to step in, and it was a bit of a nightmare this morning to leave her, and she was screaming, don't leave her. Anyways, I have set up data platforms at many different companies as a consultant, as well as product companies, a startup. So I have, I would say, quite an extensive experience in doing this several times. My area of expertise is within data engineering, as well as analytics engineering, if you're familiar with this. But I have a background in software development. So I think the cross-intersection is where I thrive the most, and I think is the most interesting. And I currently work at a small boutique data consultancy based here in Malmö called Data DAO. When exemplifying today, I'm going to base it on this really nice company called Roast and Relish that I made up with the help of ChatGPT, which is an online coffee subscription service where you can get freshly roasted beans directly into your postbox. Who here likes coffee? And out of you, is keep your hands up if you like Svega Skånerost. Yeah, I'm not talking to you anymore. No, if you don't like coffee, I'm sorry. There's going to be a lot of coffee references here, a lot of coffee pictures. But okay, let's get started. So at Roast and Relish, the leadership, they want to take the next step in becoming data-driven. And they want to implement this data platform, to end the issue of having siloed data and competing truths. We don't want that. And you are responsible for the delivery of this data platform. And to prove that this is the right decision to have a data platform, to prove the worth of the data platform, as well as your own worth, you want to show value fast. You want this to take months, maybe even weeks, but you don't want this to be a year-long iterative process that never really reaches a goal that is truly valuable. And the best way to prove value is by having a use case, because the data platform in itself is inherently not valuable. A platform is just a tool, you could argue. You want to be able to use it for something. And you want to have good use cases, especially when starting off, when building your data platform. You want to show from A to Z, from start to finish. Using this data platform, I managed to achieve this use case. And this brings us to the first pitfall, picking the wrong use cases. If you're picking too many use cases, obviously, you're not going to be very focused on any one. You're not spending any specific effort on one thing that's going to help you reach that into goal. As well as just picking a bad use case that inherently isn't valuable is also a pitfall. So what we want to do is we want to find that one use case that is actually going to be easy to implement and is actually going to show value. We want to find the shortest path to value. And I'm sure you've seen different versions of this matrix before. We have effort on the x-axis, and we have value on the y-axis, and we want a quick win. So we want something that is not going to require a lot of effort. We don't want the most advanced machine learning use case that is going to require months and months of training a model. We want something that should be easy to fix with this data platform, and that will hopefully generate a lot of value. Now, how do we find this use case? I'm going to provide 5 tips. Yes, 5. I needed to count. 5 tips that I usually use when picking between different use cases. The first one. And this is nothing revolutionary, but I always pick a concrete use case with measurable outcomes over something that is vague and inspirational. And this definitely holds true for non-data related things as well. Concrete is usually a lot better, right? We're going to have clear expectations. You say that, I understand what you mean. Being able to say, with this specific data, we can change that behavior, which is going to result in a change, which we can prove with this metric. Very specific and a lot better than we could do. It would be nice to have, later we can show. Choose the concrete use case. Second tip, who is going to benefit from this use case? I always try to pick a use case that is going to be beneficial for a team over a use case that is going to be beneficial for a single person or even the entire organization. Benefiting a single person, well, the good thing about that is you can put a lot of effort into catering it for this person. However, it's not really proving the point that the data platform is going to help the whole organization. Whereas if you find a use case that is beneficial for the entire organization, where there you run the risk of not meeting the expectations for a few people because there's just too many to please. And if you fail to meet the expectations of certain people, well, they're going to be less likely to use the data platform. And that's inherently where we want to go. We want everyone to some way or another use it. So the sweet spot is a team. If we find a use case where, not one single person, but a few people will benefit from it, you can be sure to be focused, but also prove that many people can benefit from it. So a team is the sweet spot. Third thing, finding a use case that is continuously valuable and not just a one-time delivery. Now, what do I mean by that? To truly promote a healthy kind of data-driven mindset in your organization, you want to ensure that this use case will result in an outcome, a behavior change, not just an output, an artifact. So you want a behavior change, an outcome, not an output, an artifact. The behavior is, I think, the key for really achieving data-drivenness in an organization. So ask your stakeholder for that specific use case, how would you work differently if this is in place? And if the stakeholder says, well, it would be interesting, don't pick that use case. And also, suggestion, ban the word interesting. You should never use that word in your business context. It's a scary word. Ban the word interesting. That's another extra tip. Pick a use case where the data is available today. When I say the data, I mean the data required for that specific use case. And don't pick the use case where the data required is going to be available to you soon. Oh, you don't want to, introduce this extra dependency on some other team that is this integration that you have no control over. That is likely going to postpone your delivery with months. So make sure that you have the data available today. And finally, and I might make some people angry here, but I always try to pick a use case that isn't going to result in a dashboard over a use case that is. A good visualization can be great, fair enough, but to successfully deliver a dashboard that is not going to result in just 10 new requests for new dashboards, rather than actually changing daily decision making, is very difficult and very rare. And the few times I've seen it, I could count it on one hand. Truly doing good dashboarding is difficult. Let's exemplify this a little bit. So Roast and Relish, you remember the coffee subscription service company? Yeah, hey, we have coffee. Well, you had a workshop at Roast and Relish with people with different perspectives, and you came up with a list of use cases that you prioritized. Really nice. And at the top of this list, you had proactive retention. Sounds fancy, right? Reduce churn by predicting which customers are at risk, and then, putting a lot of effort on those customers. Sounds very good, very valuable. However, when you think about it one step further, you realize, what are the main reasons for churn? We don't actually know that. This would require additional effort, or the data is not yet available. This is not the right use case for, showing the worth of the data platform. Okay, what's the second on the list? Second on the list is protecting against volatile bean prices. Because as I'm sure many of you have noticed, coffee has become very expensive, right? I hope somebody can agree with me. Otherwise, you have very deep pockets. I think coffee has become very expensive. The idea here is to look at historic coffee bean purchases from different coffee bean suppliers and compare that with global coffee market prices to see which supplier offered a good deal. And then do some smart, demand forecasting, looking at our inventory and some trend analysis to figure out which supplier should we buy our coffee beans from. And this way we can save some money. Is this a realistic use case? I don't know, ChatGPT said it was, and hopefully it is. But I think this is great, and Roast and Relish is really happy, especially the main stakeholder for this, who is the inventory manager. She is really excited about this use case. Let's summarize the first point. So to quickly be able to show value, we want the shortest path to value. So we want to find a concrete, low-effort, high-value use case so that we can show from A to Z. This use case should be beneficial for a team, continuously beneficial, and the required data is available today, and the use case is not just a dashboard. I'm going to drink some coffee now. Okay, back to Roast and Relish. We have our use case. It's time to do some data modeling. And the shortest path would be to create one model, one fat table that is connected directly to our data sources. So it will look something like this maybe. So we have this one table in our data warehouse that has a lot of SQL logic. We fetch data from our subscription database, our inventory database. We have an external API where we have global coffee bean prices. We have the ERP system from where we can get historic coffee bean purchases. And using this, we can figure out different kind of scenarios. What if the market goes up 10%? How will that affect our margin? What if our subscription demand goes down 15%? We can do lots of these kind of simulations. So that's what this table would do. In addition to the actual logic to solve the problem, we also need to handle the technicalities of our data sources. So the databases, they contain multiple tables. The subscription database has multiple tables, some certain kind of schema. Similarly with the inventory one there. The API has its, things that you need to keep in mind about the structure of the response of the API. The ERP system, let's not talk about that. That's an ugly system. I mean, it makes sense, but when you want to extract something, it's messy. All of these technicalities, they need to be handled as well in this green box. So we have something there, this model, this table, which has a lot of logic, both business logic and technical logic. Hopefully you should already be like, this doesn't feel good. Now imagine down the line, we have new use cases. And they're also based on roughly the same data sources. Well, there's going to be a bit of overlap. Let's agree on that. I mean, they're also fetching data from the same data sources. And there's going to be a bit of duplicate data, duplicate logic. Are we transforming and processing these data sources the same way in these different use cases? Is the definition of a subscription the same in our first use case, the first green box, as in the new green box further down the line? Or are we introducing a nuance of what a subscription actually is? Are we introducing multiple definitions? Are we introducing multiple versions of truth? Which, if you remember, was one of the things we wanted to solve initially. And now imagine there is a change to the API so that the response now looks a little bit different. Now we need to update the logic in all three of our green boxes. Are we doing it the same way? You're frowning. That's good. You should be frowning. And now imagine there's an error in the ERP system. So we realize they have 1 week of faulty data. That's also a little bit worrying. So we need to handle that in all three of these use case green boxes there. These are just a few brief examples, but hopefully you get the idea. A badly structured data model can lead to a lot of pain. This is the second pitfall I wanted to talk about today. And the solution is very simple. Do proper data modeling. It's nothing revolutionary. And hopefully a lot of you know how to do that. So how many of you know how to do good data modeling? I'm curious. Be confident. Come on, I'm sure you know more than you think. Robert, nice. Well, like I said, this is nothing revolutionary. This has been done in many older companies for decades. And I'm sure many of you have interacted with the legacy data warehouse, which feels a little bit slow. But when you look at it, you realize there's been a lot of thought put into how it's been modeled. There's a good structure. Whereas in a lot of modern companies, you just kind of skip this data modeling step because, well, it's so cheap anyways with modern cloud technologies and the tools are very easy. You can just build something new. It's just so simple. Well, it works in the beginning. And then it will bite you in the butt. Let's put it that way. So my suggestion for you is to model for your current use case, because we want to do the shortest path to value. So let's focus on our current use case. But let's also enable for future use cases. And how do we do that? I'm going to be more concrete than that, thankfully. I suggest using a use case agnostic layer between your use case and your data source. Or for you, it's the other way around, maybe. Use case, data source. If this use case agnostic layer is in between and you force all data to go through this layer, and you can ensure that this layer in between is structured, tested, qualified, normalized, and everyone sources from this place, you're in a good spot. Especially if you model this static use case agnostic layer against your business. So I usually talk about this as being the domain layer, where each table in this layer maps to a business entity. So there's, to the best of your ability, a one-to-one mapping between that table and the thing in real life. Not catered for a specific use case, but just for what it is. Let's exemplify a little bit. So here we have, again, for our Roast and Relish, our beautiful coffee subscription service, we have 3 layers. We have the source and staging layer, which you could argue could be split up as well. The data sources, they feed in from the left, so we can't even see the data sources now. We have the domain layer in the middle, and then we have on the way right, in the green box, that's where we have our use cases in the presentation layer. So where we want to do this nice, good, proper data modeling is in the yellow box there in the middle. We want the subscription table. We want every row in that table to represent a current or old subscription between, from a customer. What beans are they subscribing to? How many? How often? How much are they paying? In the inventory table, each row there just explains the inventory at a certain time. Coffee bean purchases, historic coffee bean purchases from different suppliers. And they're not catered for any specific use case. They're just, a good representation as possible to what it is in real life, to your business. The good thing about modeling your business is that your business is usually relatively static. Unless you are a very early stage startup, your business model is going to look roughly the same, and your business entities are going to be more or less unchanging. So with this setup, you could change your CRM system, which is one of the sources. So you'd need to change the integration. But the entity, the table in your domain layer, will remain and be unchanged. You have something nice and static. You have something robust upon which you can build your key use case data on. We get something that is way more understandable, way more maintainable, also reusable. We don't want any duplicate stuff. And most importantly, we're getting closer to this utopia, one source of truth, where everyone is talking the same language and basing their decisions on the same data. Is it? There's obviously no right or wrong answer here, but I would definitely focus on the ones that are necessary for this use case. Yeah. Which also could mean that we might need to, we maybe don't model that every entity to its fullest extent as well. So maybe you skip certain pieces of the subscription. I think that's fine. Yeah, great question. All right, to summarize, this is the second takeaway I want you to take with you, is just do proper data modeling. Spend time on this use case agnostic domain layer. And if you spend time there and just model the ones that you need for your specific use case, you don't need to model your entire business. I'm sure there's some entities that are not going to be relevant initially. Then you can model for your presentation or for your use case in the presentation layer. Okay, we have our use case, we have our data model. How do we actually implement this? Which tools do we pick? There are a million tools out there. You do a quick research and you find tools for ingesting data from one place to another, for storing data, for transforming data, visualizing data, accessing data. I mean, there is honestly something for everything. But you do find this one nice SaaS tool that seems to have it all kind of combined. Very convenient to buy one tool that solves everything, right? Maybe. Let's talk about it. You look at the pricing model and you see that there is one pricing tier that seems to be reasonable for your company, for Roast and Relish. It allows for a certain amount of processing of data every month, certain amount of data sources. But the next level in pricing is very expensive. How quickly before we end up there? You look at the list of features and you realize that there's a relatively limited selection of transformations, the kind of things you can do on the data. When I say transformations, I mean aggregations, joins, and things like that. Is this going to be enough, or are we going to hit a wall? The customer support for this SaaS tool, they claim that they will respond within a maximum of 1 week. Is that enough? Or are we going to be at the mercy of this customer support team? I don't know. And is this tool well known and attractive for a potential future data hire? Or will a future data hire say, whoa, you're using that thing? I don't want to touch that. That is not something you should, ignore either. This is important. And is it possible to move away from this tool? Or are we locking ourselves in because it's a very tool-specific, definition of how to set up your data pipelines or whatever it might be? And this brings us to the third pitfall. As I'm sure you could have figured out already, there are great vendor tools out there. I'm not bashing on everything here, but I'm bringing out the worst arguments for my benefit. But keep in mind, I'm reasonable as well. There are good tools out there that solve a lot of great problems in certain companies. However, if you want to be in control of your pricing, if you want to use a common data programming language like Python or SQL and not something vendor-specific, drag and drop, if you want to have access to the error logs and be in control of debugging and not some scary black box, and if you want to use a tool that is, I would say, within quotations, future-proof and something that people want to work with, then use one of the great open source tools out there, because there are a bunch. I'm not saying they're all great, but there are a few that really, really are great and have become standards in many ways. There are also a lot of great open source data formats that many vendors are using, which is also very interesting. And that is my third takeaway that I want you to bring with you today, that really consider these open source alternatives. Depending on the tech in your company and organizational prerequisites and the kind of data sources, your needs are going to look different. But I'm always going to claim that you're going to need at least to do the following 3 things. You're going to need to ingest data, transform data, and orchestrate data workloads. And therefore, I'm going to present one tool for each one of these things, one open source tool. First one, ingestion, DLT. Who is familiar with this? Not very many. Exciting. Okay. Stands for Data Load Tool. It's a great open source Python library. and for ingesting data, so for fetching data from one place and putting it someplace else. It supports, I think the latest I saw, it supports 5,000 different kinds of data sources. This is community-led, and the community have added support for more and more data sources. Everything from different kinds of databases, different SQL dialects, different kind of APIs, responses, cloud vendors, specific proprietary vendor tools as well. So you can actually fetch data from non-open source things as well. And it supports a bunch of different destinations. And it has nice cookie-cutter templates, so you can quickly get off the ground. You don't need to implement everything from yourself. You don't need to reinvent the wheel, because it is a very repetitive task to fetch data from one place and put it someplace else. And if you'd asked me 1 year ago, I would have been a little bit hesitant to recommend it, but it has really become so mature, I would say, in the last year, and the community is growing so much. So I can strongly, strongly recommend this tool. Number 2, who has heard about dbt? A few more. I'm happy to hear that. And that goes to say a little bit, because dbt has become the industry standard for transforming data. Let's put it that way. So DLT, data load tool, they got their name and they were inspired by dbt, data build tool, and has been around for soon, I think, 10 years. And it has completely revolutionized the way the data industry is working with data. And for those of you that are not familiar, the concept is that you write kind of SQL-like code that you then compile to real SQL that you run against your data storage. And what dbt did so well is that they introduced best practices from software development, like reusability, running the same code against different environments, handling dependencies between different tables and views in your data storage. You can document models, you can run tests on it, and yeah, it's become the industry standard. In its root, it's nothing revolutionary, but they really standardized the way how to do this, and I think it's commendable. However, I need to say, 1 month ago, dbt Labs, the main company behind dbt, they were acquired by Fivetran. And Fivetran does not have a history of backing open source. And they claim that they will continue doing so, but they also have a new offering, which is called dbt Fusion, which is not the open source alternative called dbt Core. We shall see. The future will tell how open source this will be. However, the community is so big, so that I'm not too worried. In one form or another, it will continue. It's just too big. But you need to know that. And it's such a shame. Fivetran. Ugh. There's another exciting company called SQL Mesh, a good alternative. However, they were also acquired by Fivetran. Unbelievable. Okay. Third one, dagster for data orchestration. Who is familiar with data orchestration? Yeah, data orchestrator. So the idea is that you need a tool to schedule these data jobs, when to ingest data, when to transform data, and manage the dependencies between. So you don't want to transform the data until you've fetched the latest data, for instance. Or you don't want to run the transformation if the ingestion failed. Or you want to introduce a retry logic and these kind of things. That's what a data orchestrator does for you. The biggest, most famous alternative out there is called Airflow, which was open sourced by Airbnb. Dagster, I think, is the hot and fresh take on it. The way it differs is that they also model data assets, not just data workloads. And it's declarative and type safe. It works really, really well with both DLT and dbt. And it's just a pleasure to work with. So I recommend it. So at Roast and Relish, to exemplify this a little bit, they are using GCP for a few databases and a few services. So it was kind of a short leap to implement these tools that I just mentioned in Google Cloud. And that's exactly what we're going to do there. So we're going to use BigQuery as their data warehouse. That's where we're going to store the data. So that's something offered by GCP. And then we're setting up containers. That's the white boxes and the green one there for one container for each data source where we're using DLT. And then we have a single container for dbt that contains all our transformation logic. And these services, or these containers, we can run in Cloud Run Jobs, for instance, which is their container service in GCP. And then we let dagster decide when to trigger these different services. And dagster we can run in GCE, Google Compute Engine, Google Cloud SQL, and Google Cloud Storage. So we need to use a few services. But it's easy to host these things in GCP. That's what I want to say here. Or in other places. It's open source. Host it where you want to. The main stakeholder, she is connecting her preferred tool of choice, Excel, to BigQuery, so that she can decide from which coffee supplier to buy her coffee beans from. Let's not bash on Excel too much. Let's just do it enough. To summarize, DLT for ingestion, dbt for transformation, and dagster for data orchestration. Okay, so at this point, we have actually now successfully delivered the first few iterations of this first use case in our newly built data platform. Way! Yes, nice. The main stakeholder, the inventory manager, she is super stoked. She's been really involved during the entire process, given a lot of feedback. And she is a strong user of the data in the data platform, but she's also the only user. And that brings us to the final pitfall. The platform is just not being used. If you have one person using the data platform, you don't have a platform, do you? You just have another tool. And you're definitely not solving the problem of different truths if people are not using this tool that is supposed to solve this. So how do we figure this out? Well, my suggestion is to get help from your colleagues or specific individuals within your organization. You want to find passionate people that can be advocates for your data platform, as well as for working data-driven within your company in places where you are not. Because you can't be in every meeting and every team. You need people to help. And I would claim that this is crucial. Even if you don't have a data platform, you need data champions. You need advocates for promoting a data-driven mindset. How to find these people? There are a few traits you can look for. You want to find people that are data literate, that can understand the potential, the requirements, and the risks of data use cases. Maybe a power user of the data platform. Curious people that want to learn new things. People that are willing to invest time in something new, knowing that there is a possibility to profit from it. If you can check at least a few of these, then you're likely found a good candidate for a data champion. And in the case of Rose and Relish, we're in luck because the stakeholder, the inventory manager, she's the chosen one. I mean, she's passionate. She's already using the data platform. She's already told your colleagues just how great it's been for her. So she's the chosen one of hopefully many. All right. I'm actually nearing the end of this talk here. So let's summarize this a little bit. We're implementing a data platform and we want to succeed. And some of the best ways to do that is by, especially in the beginning, picking a low effort, high value use case that can prove the value of your data platform. Don't forget to do proper data modeling. Model your business entities in a domain layer that's use case agnostic. Use DLT for ingestion, dbt for transformation, dagster for data orchestration, and find passionate people that can help spread the word. And hopefully you feel like this seems very easy. Why haven't we implemented a data platform yet? Or at least I recognize some of the pains that you mentioned. And I guess what I'm trying to say here is that this doesn't have to be that difficult. At least from a technical perspective, it really isn't. The tricky part is change management, and change management is always going to be difficult. So hopefully using some of these tips and some of good prioritizations and just good common sense, I'm convinced that you can really succeed with your own data platform and achieve this state of one source of truth. And before I open up for any question, I just want to make some advertisements for this Swedish podcast that I'm a part of, especially for you, Malcolm, where we talk about data and being data-driven, where we have a focus on people and the human in the process. And we talk about new tech and new phenomena, and we have guests. We've had a doctor, we had a member of Swedish Parliament, we had an AI professor. We had the bishop in Lund talk about how the Swedish church works in a data-driven way. So yeah, scan the QR code and have a listen. All right, thank you so much. And don't feel that you have to stay if you don't have any questions. But thank you so much for joining. Are there any questions? So the question was, I work as a consultant, so what do my customers, how do they respond when we suggest using an open source tool? Majority of the, I would say I personally have not had problems with that a single time. I don't know if that says something about me or about the customers that we have. In the end, I think it probably depends totally on who you're working with. But if you're truly serious about your initiative, about working with data, then you realize the true potential in these open source tools, and you listen to reason. Yeah. Updates to like schemas. It depends. Is the short answer. But you're talking about in the domain layer, you said. Well, it depends on how you structure those specific models, but it depends if you're working with like slowly changing dimension format, or if you're just depending. Like it depends on how you structure it, and there's no easy answer for that, I'm afraid. Yeah. You do it in different ways. Sometimes I do like just thinking about things being immutable as well. So if I feel like there's not too much data and it's not going to be too expensive, I prefer duplicates rather than updating specific rows. I don't want to change anything. I prefer appending and then just having, this is an older version of the data and this is the latest version or whatever it might be. But it depends. Yeah. I don't know if that was a good response. What are my thoughts on Power BI? Yeah, how do I put this nicely? No, I think the fundamental problem with any BI tool, like dashboarding tool, is that a lot of dashboarding tools lure you in to put a lot of logic in these tools. And then you end up in this situation where you're locked in that specific vendor. Also, that the BI tools are seldom version controlled, rarely documented. So what happens is you build in a lot of critical business logic in something that might not even be version controlled. I can't swear maybe Power BI is version controlled today. Okay, well, we have a strong Microsoft enthusiast there. That's good. Thank you, Christian. I prefer putting as little logic as possible in the visualization layer. So another topic that I could easily have spent 40 minutes on is metric first. So where you have maybe a semantic layer on top of your data storage, where you define metrics, and then your dashboarding tool, it might be Power BI or whatever it might be, would just interact with the semantic layer, and you would calculate and get the business answers there on the fly, but it's not baked into in the dashboarding tool. I'm going to stop now before I start rambling. Great question. Yes? Yeah, so I should mention that everything that I mentioned today is very batch-oriented, not so much event or real-time. And DBT and DLT, I would say, inherently are more batch-based. So I think that's a great, relevant point to bring up. With that said, I would say a majority of data use cases, batch workloads will get you probably into the goal. And with that said, a batch workload could be if you run every 2 seconds, every 5th second, that's still batch versus event-driven. But the tools I mentioned today, I would say, are not suitable in a good way for event-driven setup, no. All right, I think they want... DBT. Yeah. I wouldn't trust it. But I didn't know that. Oh, yeah, okay. Then I would have to hear more about that. Yeah, okay, cool. All right, I think we need to leave. Yeah, thank you so much.